Good afternoon, Center for Law and Social Justice family and friends. My name is Larry Daniel Favors, and I'm the Executive Director at CLSJ, based at the Medgar Evers College. Election Day is less than 2 weeks away. And this year, racial equity and racial justice are literally on the ballot. Here at CLSJ, we are very deeply committed to voter participation and engagement and to racial equity. And this election cycle, as in right now, each of these elements are combining and intersecting in ways that will allow voters to move our city one step closer to equity and justice. There is a lot at stake and a lot to take in. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to do a video component to this letter so that people can get the information as easily as they possibly can. Question for you. Do you remember the spring of 2020 and what that was like in New York City when the sounds of sirens was almost nonstop and when COVID-19 was ravaging Black communities and keeping racial inequities at the front page? Do you remember how for the first time we heard the name of Ahmaud Arbery, a young Black man who'd been hunted down by racist vigilantes because he had the nerve to jog while Black? We heard for the first time the name Breonna Taylor, who was murdered by police in her home in the dead of night because of a no-knock warrant. And then we watched as 4 police officers lynched George Floyd on a public street in front of community members and cell phone cameras. And in response, something broke a little bit. Americans took to the streets by the millions, by the 26 millions to be exact, and more than 26 million Americans participated in protests that lasted not just a day, not just a weekend, not even just a week, but week after week, month after month. Millions of Americans came out in every single state in this nation to demand substantive change, to demand that something be done to address the racial inequities that we simply could no longer ignore. And thankfully, New Yorkers were very much a part of that number. Unlike many protests, however, the intensity of the 2020 protests really triggered a series of government responses in our city that set us on a path toward change that we are able to really grapple with right now. So then Mayor Bill de Blasio, in response to the protesters' demand for change, he took a couple of steps. One couple of which I kind of laughed at. The third, not so much. He first painted Black Lives Matter on city streets. And I thought, well, that's lovely. I too love a good Black Lives Matter sign in public spaces, but that was not substantive change. I don't think anyone thought that was substantive change. We knew it was not substantive change. And then he took it a step further and he named Juneteenth a city holiday. I know a lot of you don't remember that because quickly thereafter, the federal government took moves to do the same thing and declared Juneteenth a federal holiday. But that was something that Bill de Blasio, former mayor of the city of New York, put forward as one of his responses to the demands of the protesters. Again, I was happy with this. I thought it was nice. It was a lovely gesture, but it certainly was not substantive structural change. The third step that former Mayor de Blasio took, however, that was a game changer, or at least it has the potential to be, depending on how you all vote in the election that's happening right now. Recognizing that New Yorkers were demanding substantive change, Bill de Blasio, in his capacity as mayor, created the New York City Racial Justice Commission. This was a groundbreaking commission with the power to study the impact of structural change in city government and with the power to make suggested changes to our city's charter in order to uproot it. Now, our city's charter is our constitution. Much like the nation's constitution determines how the nation should run and the rules that it operates by, our city charter does the same for us here in the city. And he tasked us as commissioners, because hi, I'm one of the commissioners, he tasked the commission with 2 responsibilities: investigate how structural racism shows up, and then propose solutions that can begin to remedy the harm that structural racism and inequities cause. I am proud to be one of those 11 commissioners, and after hosting dozens of in-person meetings, virtual forums, public forums where we took testimony. We heard from subject matter experts. We had events all over the city in every single borough in the city where New Yorkers could come out and talk with us in language that was relevant for them and empowering for them about the ways that structural racism had negatively impacted their lives. And after hearing from thousands of you, after reading your testimonies, we took some pretty decisive steps in our effort to advance equity as a commission. First, we produced a report. actually two reports, the interim and the final report. And all of these reports, they summarize all of the information that was gathered through the public hearing process. And because building equity is an ongoing process, we realized that we couldn't just name all the ways that racism impacts all of you and that you shared with us during those processes. And we couldn't just talk about what you said. We also had to include solutions. Solutions that, quite frankly, we did not have the capacity or the time to enact, but which we think the city should strongly consider as it determines how it wants to move forward. And those proposals are in that report, and you can get access to that report right now at nyc.gov/racial justice. But the second thing that we did is why I'm having this conversation with you right now. We came up with 3 ballot proposals that, if implemented, would take the very decisive first step, and I do mean first of many, of building a more racially just and equitable New York City. Voters will be able to, and actually are voting yes or no right now on these proposals in this election cycle because it's early voting. Go vote. As a member of the commission, I cannot tell you how to vote, but as a Black woman, as the daughter of a Black father who grew up in Harlem, and a Jamaican immigrant mother who grew up in Queens, as a Black parent who birthed 2 Black children in this city, as a wife to a Black man, and as a homeowner of a home on a predominantly Black block in a predominantly Black New York City neighborhood, I am going to be able to tell you why I personally will be voting yes on every single one, because I am voting yes on every single one. Now, let's be clear. I believe that building healthier Black communities and healthier communities for all of us requires integrity and truth. So I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to pretend like these proposals are going to eradicate white supremacy. They won't. They just won't. And they're not going to give you reparations. I need to dispel that rumor, which I've also heard. This is not about reparations. That's another commission, one I believe strongly and would love to be a part of, but which is not this work. However, these ballot proposals do have the capacity to be paradigm shifting. And if New Yorkers vote for them, then the proposals would amend our city charter, our governing document, and set us on a path towards racial equity in city governance, the likes of which, frankly, this nation has never seen. The 3 questions on the charter amendments on your ballot are going to be the following. Number 1, should New York City add a statement of values to guide government? I'm voting yes, because this proposal takes a Sankofa approach in that it calls for the city to acknowledge its past as it makes plans for the future. Y'all know I believe in Sankofa, or those of you who know me know I believe in Sankofa, which is a West African principle that basically says we have to look to the past to understand how we got to where we are, and we have to use that knowledge in order to build a just future. And if New Yorkers vote yes, then this statement of values will be the preamble to our city's charter, because we don't currently have a preamble to the city's charter. And it would also include a statement that acknowledges the role that racism played in the development of our city. And it includes a statement that says that as we make governing decisions for the future, that we must strive to remedy the past and continuing harms that that racist history creates. It says that the city must govern itself in ways that will reconstruct, revise, and reimagine our foundations, structures, institutions, and laws to promote racial justice and equity for all New Yorkers. And if New Yorkers vote yes on this proposal, then when there are governing decisions to be made, city leaders must now reach for the decisions and the policies that will enhance racial equity and will enhance racial justice, as opposed to reaching for the decision that produces more of the same. The second ballot proposal that I will be voting yes on is the ballot proposal that asks New Yorkers whether or not we should establish a permanent racial equity office, plan, or commission. And this proposal would embed a mandated racial equity infrastructure throughout city government. It's a game changer. It's a complete paradigm shift. And if New Yorkers vote yes for the proposal, then every single city agency would be required to produce a racial equity plan every 2 years. And these plans would not only document the history of racial inequities and how the previous multi-year period has gone, but it would also include the strategies and the goals and the data necessary to improve racial equity or to reduce or eliminate racial disparities going forward. Every single city agency, NYPD, MTA, sanitation, every single agency, we have more than 50 of them, would have to think about the ways that racial inequities has really characterized their service provision up until this point. And then beyond that, what are they going to do about it? How are we going to ensure that they are directing their budget and their decision-making as an agency to ensure that equity is a part of the calculus? not just an add-on or an also good to have, but an actual part of the fundamental goal for how that agency operates. Based on this proposal, if New Yorkers vote yes, the city would also have to establish an office of racial equity and appoint a chief equity officer to advance racial equity and to coordinate the planning process. Because if 51 city agencies are coming up with plans that are going to center equity in how they run and how they operate and how they distribute their resources, then we want to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. Well, at least in the same pulpit, or even if we're not all sitting in the same pew, but that we're all working in a cohesive manner. We wouldn't want every single agency working in 51 different directions. We would want them to be able to have some coordination. We recognize that not every single city agency currently has people on staff who have expertise in racial equity. And so this office would be able to provide that support to ensure that our agencies are meaningfully grappling with how they should be moving forward. This proposal would also create a commission on racial equity, appointed that would be populated by people who are appointed, who are representative of our communities racially in terms of socioeconomic class, and it would ensure that there is a budget for this commission. The commission I'm currently on, the Racial Justice Commission that created these proposals, this was voluntary. We did not get compensated for this. That can be a real burden for some people who have excellent ideas and wonderful ways to move forward, but can't afford to take the time to spend on a city commission and not be compensated for that time or their expertise. So the way we structured this would be that this commission would be able to have appointed to it members who represent all of our communities and who would be compensated for their time and their expertise and who have a history of advocating for change to improve those who have traditionally been marginalized. This commission would identify and propose priorities that would inform the racial equity planning process and would review the agency and citywide racial equity plan. So we're talking about a multi-part effort, not just an office, not just an officer, but a multi-part effort that really seeks to ensure that we're clear about what it is we're doing, that we've studied the data, and that we're making informed decisions that will move our city forward. The third ballot proposal that I will happily be voting yes on is the proposal that seeks to measure a true cost of living for our city. Let me ask you a question. How much do you think it costs for a family of four to live in this city and actually have a shot? Like, how much do you think it would cost? I've heard some people say, oh, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Well, did you know that a family of four in our city that earns $30,000 makes too much money to receive significant forms of government assistance? And that's because the federal formulas inform our governing and budgeting process. And according to the federal formulas, if you are a family of four making more than $30,000 a year, then you are not poor enough to require government assistance. But we all actually live here, and we know that that is not the case. And as long as the income qualifications for public assistance remain artificially low, then the racial wealth gap is going to accrue. It's going to persist, it's going to increase, and it's going to get that much worse. If New Yorkers approve this proposal and vote yes, then the city will be required to create a true cost of living measure to track the actual cost of meeting essential needs, including housing, food, childcare, transportation, and other necessary costs, and without considering public, private, or informal assistance. This true cost of living, instead of that artificially low number, would be used in order to inform the programmatic and policy decisions of our city. It will require city government to report annually on the true cost of living measure. This is a game changer because I am a family of four. I guarantee you $30,000 means nothing to a family that is trying to actually have a shot at securing anything close to the American dream in this city. So if you turned out to protest in 2020, then every one of us who are seeking racial justice and a more equitable city, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Remarkable acts of civic engagement that they were, the protests also forced the government to respond to the demands of the people for justice. And as a result, we now have the opportunity right now to permanently set our city on a path towards advancing racial equity and justice through structural change, not surface level change, structural change. And as if that isn't good enough reason to vote, there's a fourth statewide ballot that I will also be voting yes on. And this is statewide. Unfortunately, only New York City residents can vote on the three ballot proposals I just mentioned. But all of us in the state of New York will also get to decide whether or not we want the state to invest more than $4 billion in resources to make our city and our state more environmentally just. It is asking if we want the state to invest it's $4.2 billion in environmental improvements that preserve, enhance, and restore New York's natural natural resources and reduce the impact of climate change. So yeah, because I have kids and I actually like breathing air and drinking clean water, I will be voting yes on that one as well. For the first time, racial equity and justice are on the ballot. Environmental protection is on the ballot. And this election, we have the opportunity to vote for policies that are going to put us on a path towards racial and environmental equity. It's not going to solve all the problems, not at all. But it will put our city on a guardrail, a set of guardrails that will ensure we are headed in the right direction, as opposed to just getting more of the same. But we have to do the work, or we have to continue the work. That is, if we believe in racial equity as a vision for our city. And if so, then I encourage you to visit nyc.gov/racial justice. That's nyc.gov/racial justice to learn more about these very important racial justice initiatives. To learn more about the state ballot proposal, you can click the link in our newsletter. And we need you to spread the word. We need you to tell your friends, your families, and your neighbors so that we can all work together to make the Big Apple actually mean something for the rest of us, a beacon of opportunity. Make sure you tell everyone to flip your ballot, because if you don't flip it, you will miss it. So flip your ballot to vote for equity, flip your ballot to vote for racial and environmental justice, and do so as a part of a vote plan. So after you've gone to cast your vote, I need you to go and get 21 other people, text them, call them, walk with them to the polls. We need 22 and 22. And if every single one of us contacted 22 people in 22, then this election cycle would do more than just provide us a different slate of candidates or another slate of elected officials. It will literally empower our city to center racial justice in ways we have never done before. And that's something worth fighting for. Thank you so much.